My parents evicted me. So my sister could have my room for her baby. Now they're broke, homeless, and I own the house they tried to steal. I've always been the family afterthought, the invisible one, the one they'd call only when something needed fixing or when they needed someone to blame. Growing up, it was obvious. Lily was the star of the show. My parents didn't even try to hide it. She could crash the car, fail her exams, throw tantrums at dinner, and somehow she'd still be their sweet girl who just made a mistake. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. Not because they ever praised me for it, but because someone had to be. I got my first job at 16, stacking boxes in a dusty warehouse to pay for my own laptop. My parents never once asked how I was managing work and school. They just said, "You should be more like your sister, learn to relax." I guess in their eyes, struggling meant I wasn't doing enough. I remember nights studying under the dim light of a cracked desk lamp, hearing Lily blast music downstairs while Mom cooked her favorite meal. Dad would pop in, telling me to keep it down, as if my silence was louder than her chaos. That's when I learned something important. Love in my house wasn't earned through effort. It was inherited through favoritism. Even when I got into college on scholarship, their reaction was lukewarm. Mom's first question wasn't, "Congratulations," but, "How much will it cost us?" Lily, on the other hand, failed 2 semesters and got a, "Don't worry, honey, we'll figure it out." Still, I told myself family was family. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they just expressed love differently. But deep down, I knew something about Lily's power over them wasn't normal. She could do no wrong, and I could never do enough. I just didn't know then that this imbalance, this quiet injustice, would one day cost me everything I called home. My room was the only place that ever felt like mine. 4 small walls that somehow held all my sanity together. I'd built everything in it with my own hands. The desk from scrap wood, the bookshelf from old crates, even the peeling paint on the wall told my story. Every corner carried a piece of me. The posters I'd hung in high school, the medals my parents never acknowledged, the memories of nights I'd cried quietly just to keep the peace. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One evening, I came home from work to find Lily sitting on the couch, glowing like she'd just won the lottery. Mom was practically bouncing beside her. "Guess what?" she said. "Your sister's pregnant." I smiled politely, trying to be happy for her. But before I could even say congratulations, Dad added casually, "We'll need to start preparing your room for the baby." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "You mean like a playroom?" Mom's expression didn't change. "No, honey. The baby will need a nursery. You can move into the storage room for now, or maybe find your own place. You're almost 30. It's time you stood on your own feet." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I paid rent here. I helped with groceries. I'd even covered the electricity bill last month when Dad's card bounced. And now they wanted me out. For Lily's baby. I tried to reason with them, voice shaking. "You're serious? You're kicking me out so she can have my room." Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that said she was done pretending to care. "Family sacrifices for family, son. You'll understand when you're older." That night I sat on my bed, staring at the walls I'd built around myself. My safe space, my childhood, my only refuge, and for the first time, it didn't feel like home anymore. 2 weeks later, the conversation turned into a decision. No warning, no compromise, just cold, final words delivered over dinner like they were reading a weather report. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We've talked it over, and it's best if you move out by the end of the month. Lily and Mark need stability before the baby arrives." I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard. "You're serious? You're really kicking me out?" Mom didn't even look up from her plate. "Don't be dramatic. It's just temporary until they get on their feet. You're independent. You'll manage." Independent. That word again. I'd been independent since I was 16 because they never gave me a choice. I reminded them that I paid rent, every month on time, and contributed more to the house than Lily ever had. Dad's tone hardened. We appreciate what you've done, but family needs change. You're not a child anymore." I could feel something inside me cracking, but all I managed to say was, "Right, family needs change when I'm in the way." Lily chimed in, placing a hand on her belly with a smug little smile. "Come on, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know it's not personal. We just need space, not personal." She was taking my room, the one place I'd poured myself into, and calling it not personal. That night, I walked into my room and everything felt smaller. I ran my hand across the desk I'd built, the one they'd probably toss out to make room for a crib. I should have fought harder, yelled, demanded respect. But all I could do was sit there, quiet, realizing that in this house, love was conditional, and I'd just reached my expiration date. I started packing the next day. Leaving that house felt like leaving behind a version of myself I'd never get back. I remember carrying my last box to the car while Lily stood on the porch, sipping juice from one of the mugs I bought, acting like she'd already forgotten I ever lived there. Mom didn't even come outside. She just called out from the kitchen window, "Make sure you return your key before you go." I drove to a tiny apartment across town. One bedroom, cracked ceiling, smelled faintly of mold and loneliness. The walls were thin. I could hear my neighbors arguing through the night. Still, it was mine. No one could take it away. I unpacked in silence, setting up my old desk by the window, the same one I built years ago. It was the only piece of home I brought with me. The first few weeks were brutal. My savings vanished fast. Rent, groceries, deposits. I'd come home after long shifts, too tired to cook, eating cold noodles while scrolling through pictures of my old room. Every photo stung. It wasn't just about losing space. It was about being erased from my own story. One Sunday, I decided to visit. I told myself it was to drop off some mail, but really, I just wanted to see it again. My room. When I walked in, the house smelled like baby powder and chaos. Lily's boyfriend was sprawled across my old bed, shirtless, watching TV. My desk was gone, the posters torn down, my trophies replaced by diaper boxes. "Hey," he muttered, not even looking at me. "Don't forget to take your shoes off. The baby's sleeping." Something broke inside me that day. Not rage, something quieter, colder. I realized then that I'd never really been part of that family. I was just a placeholder until they found something, or someone, more convenient. And that's when I made myself a silent promise. I would never need them again. The months that followed were the hardest of my life, but also the most defining. I threw myself into work, taking every freelance coding gig I could find. Some nights, I'd stare at the blinking cursor on my laptop until sunrise, fueled by caffeine and anger. Every line of code felt like a brick, a small piece of the wall I was building between me and them. I stopped visiting, stopped calling. Every time my phone lit up with Mom, I let it ring until it stopped. When I finally checked my messages, they were all the same. "Can you send a little money?" Or, "Your sister's car broke down again." No one asked how I was doing. Not once, but slowly my situation changed. My hard work started paying off. I got promoted at my firm, my side projects took off, and I landed a contract that tripled my income. I moved into a better apartment. Sunlight, hardwood floors, and silence that didn't ache. For the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend who still lived near my parents. "Hey man, your folks' place doesn't look so good. Roof's leaking, garden's dead. Heard Lily's boyfriend quit his job." Again, I laughed bitterly. The Golden family was starting to rust. That night, as rain tapped against my window, I thought about all those times I begged them to see me, to value me. Now they didn't even cross my mind unless someone else mentioned them. And somehow, that realization hurt less than it should have. But fate has a funny way of circling back. Because just when I thought I'd left it all behind, their world, and mine, were about to collide again in a way I never saw coming. It was a cold Tuesday morning when my phone rang. I almost ignored it. Unknown number, early hour, but something made me answer. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice cracked through the line, trembling and small. We're in trouble." For a moment, I said nothing. Trouble? For years, they'd treated me like I didn't exist. Now suddenly, I was sweetheart again, she went on, voice breaking between sobs. The bank's taking the house. We fell behind on the mortgage, and Lily, she lost her job and Mark's gone. Just gone. I sat back in my chair, the words hanging heavy. Foreclosure. The same home they kicked me out of, the place I built my childhood in, was slipping through their fingers. Dad took the phone next. His tone was forced calm, almost rehearsed. We just need a little help, son. You've got a good job now, right? Maybe you can cover the payments for a few months, just until things get better. I couldn't believe the audacity. These were the same people who told me to stand on my own feet. Now they were crawling back, asking for the ground I built beneath mine. I drove by the house that evening. The paint was peeling, weeds swallowing the yard, the same front porch where I'd once left my key. I stood there for a while, hidden across the street, watching as Mom and Lily argued in the doorway, their voices echoing into the night. A part of me felt pity. Another part, the part that still remembered being told to leave, felt something else entirely. Clarity. I realized I didn't owe them anything. Not my money, not my forgiveness. That night, I made a quiet, calculated decision, one that would change everything. If the bank wanted the house, I'd make sure I was the one who bought it. The auction was held on a rainy Thursday morning. Fitting, I thought, for the kind of closure life was offering me. I showed up early, dressed in a plain gray suit. No one there recognized me. To them, I was just another bidder. To me, this was poetic justice. The house I once called home sat listed under a sterile title, 3-bedroom property, foreclosed and in need of renovation. It sounded cold, hollow, exactly how my parents had made it feel years ago. When the bidding started, I didn't flinch. Every number that came out of the auctioneer's mouth sounded like another ghost from my past being buried. And then, silence. The final bid was mine. The gavel dropped with a hollow thud. Just like that, the house, the same one they'd thrown me out of, belonged to me. I drove there later that afternoon. The front door creaked open, revealing a mess of broken furniture, baby toys, and unpaid bills scattered across the floor. The air smelled of dust and old regret. I walked through each room, running my fingers along the chipped walls, remembering every word that had ever made me feel small. When I stepped into my old room, now empty, something inside me shifted. The same walls that once held my pain now stood silent under my ownership. I wasn't the boy they discarded anymore. I was the man who'd reclaimed what they'd destroyed. I stood there for a long time, whispering to the empty air, "This is mine now." But redemption isn't always warm. It's cold, quiet, almost lonely. Because when you finally get what you deserve, you realize the people you wanted it from were never capable of understanding it. Still, I walked out that night with the deed in my pocket, and the past finally under my control. Owning the house should have felt like victory, but the truth, it felt hollow, like standing in the ruins of a battlefield where you're the only one left breathing. A few months after I bought it, I heard the knock on my apartment door late one night. When I opened it, my mother stood there, soaked from the rain, trembling, her eyes swollen. Behind her, my father carried a duffel bag, and Lily stood under a broken umbrella, 2 small kids clinging to her legs. "Please," Mom whispered. "We have nowhere else to go." I froze. The scene was almost cinematic. The same people who once told me to leave were now begging to be let in. But all I could see was that night years ago, when I'd been the one on the porch, pleading for them to reconsider. Dad tried to sound firm, but his voice cracked. "You have the house now, don't you? Just let us stay until we figure things out." Lily spoke next, tears glistening under the porch light. "It's not for me, it's for the kids. Please, they don't deserve this." Every word cut deep, twisting the knife between pity and pride. I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to let them in. But something inside me refused, not out of cruelty but out of self-respect. You made your choice, I said quietly. You told me I'd understand when I was older. Well, I do now. Mom broke down right there, clutching the railing, sobbing. The sound echoed down the hallway like a haunting reminder of everything we'd all lost. After they left, I stood by the door for what felt like hours, numb and shaking. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty. Revenge didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief wearing armor. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and long, guilt-soaked texts from my mother and sister. "Please, honey, we're family," one said. "Just until we get back on our feet," another pleaded. Lily's message came last, short, defensive, and biting. "You're really going to let your nieces sleep in a car? You've changed." She was right. I had changed. Years ago, those words would have destroyed me. Now, they just made me sigh. I didn't owe them anything. Not after the eviction, not after the years of being invisible. Still, something in me, maybe that old obedient son, couldn't completely turn away. So I did the only thing that felt fair. I offered help with boundaries. I sent Mom a message. "I'll cover a month at a motel nearby. After that, you're on your own. But you can't come to the house." "That door's closed," she called instantly, her voice trembling. "You'd really keep your own family out of their home?" "It's not your home anymore," I said quietly. "You lost it. I just bought what you gave up." Dad tried to reason with me next, guilt dripping from every word. "Son, this isn't who you are. You're better than this." I almost laughed. "No, Dad, this is exactly who I am. The version you taught me to be. Independent." The silence that followed was deafening. I hung up before they could twist it further. That night, as I stared at the city lights from my window, I felt both liberated and haunted. I hadn't slammed the door out of hate. I did it out of necessity. Because some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. Weeks passed, and I poured myself into restoring the house. Not for them, for me. The roof that once leaked during storms was now sealed tight. The walls that had heard years of shouting were freshly painted in warm, calm colors. Every nail I hammered felt like reclaiming another piece of my peace. I didn't move in, though. I couldn't. The place still carried too many ghosts. Instead, I rented it out to a quiet family, a young couple with a toddler. They reminded me of what family should have looked like. Laughter over breakfast, small hands drawing on the porch, love that didn't need to be earned. Sometimes, I'd drive by in the evenings and see them playing in the yard where I once mowed the grass for parents who never said thank you. Watching that little family live freely where I once felt trapped. It was strange, bittersweet, healing in a way. Meanwhile, word spread. My parents were bouncing between relatives, Lily was working part-time at a grocery store, and Mark, her boyfriend, had vanished completely. They blamed everyone but themselves. In their eyes, I was the villain who let his family fall apart. But I didn't gloat. I didn't post pictures or send messages. I stayed silent. That was my revenge. Quiet success in the face of their noise. I'd learned that sometimes the loudest justice isn't confrontation. It's calm detachment. A friend once asked if I ever planned to tell them I owned the house. I just smiled. Why would I? Some lessons only sting if they never get closure. And that's what this was. Closure disguised as silence. The house they'd thrown me out of now thrived under someone else's love. And I didn't need to say a word to make that poetic. It happened 3 years later, at a distant cousin's wedding. The kind of family event you can't really avoid, no matter how much you've detached. I hadn't seen them in years, but the moment I walked into the hall, I felt their eyes on me. That familiar cocktail of guilt and bitterness. Lily was the first to approach, holding a glass of cheap wine like it was armor. "Wow," she said with a smirk. "Look who finally decided to show up. Must be nice, huh? All that money while your family's been struggling." I kept my tone calm. "Everyone makes their own choices, Lily." Her voice rose, drawing attention. "You think you're better than us because you bought a stupid house? Because you left us when we needed you most." The word house hit me like a signal flare. She knew. Someone must have told her. A few heads turned our way as she continued, voice cracking. You ruined everything. Mom and Dad still cry over what you did. You could have saved us. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in resolve. Years of silence finally found their words. Saved you? I said quietly. You mean the way you saved me when you took my room? When you stood there while they threw me out? I begged for a home, Lily, and you watched. The music in the background dimmed as people realized this wasn't small talk. My mother's face paled. My father looked away. I took a breath and finished, steady and final. You didn't lose a home because of me. You lost it because of greed, entitlement, and never taking responsibility. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of humiliation. And I knew then. I didn't need to yell, didn't need revenge. Truth itself was enough. I left before dessert was served, the whispers trailing behind me like applause. A few weeks after the wedding, I drove to the house one last time. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden light across the yard. The family I'd rented to was out front. The little boy chasing his dad with a toy plane, the mother laughing as she held a basket of laundry. The sound carried through the open window, warm and alive. I parked across the street and just watched. It was strange, seeing my house finally become a home, something it had never been when I lived there. The garden was thriving again, wildflowers spilling over the fence. The porch, once cracked and faded, now shone with fresh paint. Every piece of it looked reborn, just not for me, and that was okay. I stepped out of the car and walked to the edge of the driveway. For a long time I just stood there, taking in the air, the quiet, the closure. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad, just free. The past had always felt like an anchor. Every betrayal, every insult, every "you should be more like your sister." But standing there, watching strangers cherish what I'd lost, I realized something. The house was never about walls or ownership. It was about reclaiming worth. I whispered to myself, "You did it. You broke the cycle." As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the car window. Calm eyes, steady breath, a man who finally understood that peace isn't revenge. It's release. That night I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. They took my room, my home, my sense of belonging, but they never took my ability to rebuild. And for the first time I slept soundly. Not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. Sometimes closure doesn't come from taking back what was stolen, but from no longer needing it.